that was a really cool place to start. Are you happy to start there? Oh yeah, the book.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Never heard of keto. Sorry. Yeah.
Just written a book
we
on
could
it.
start wherever. Start with a good question. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, I'd like to start off with what Brad Kearns had for breakfast.
Oh, interesting question. Because as I immersed myself into keto, along with Mark Sisson, almost a year ago now, when we first started working on this project and realizing how hot and explosive the concept was and how popular, I did assorted different experiments to see how things would work, including a full immersion into nutritional ketosis for 140 days, where I was poking my finger and checking the blood numbers and doing all that stuff. And then I kind of spun out of it and allowed a little bit more relaxed macronutrient intake. And, I've gone for several months with just a more freewheeling approach where I bet you many, many days I'm still adhering to keto guidelines. And some days I'm not, especially if someone puts a tantalizing homemade treat in front of me. I might be known to try it and enjoy my life. So one thing I'm doing lately, this is with consultation with the guys over at Nourish, Balance, Thrive, who are doing this really interesting comprehensive wellness, peak performance, blood, urine, stool, saliva testing to identify all kinds of things that might be missed by traditional medical testing. And so I'm going through their protocol and we're doing shows about it and discussing it at length. But one of the things that Dr. Tommy Wood suggested to me was, I'm very metabolically efficient. I'm fat adapted. I can fast, no problem. And I enjoy waiting until noon to eat my first meal as a routine. Seems to work well for me. But he also speculated that at times, because I continue to have these athletic goals and want to, stay fit and do performance-related things, maybe I wasn't consuming enough calories at times due to all the fasting that I was doing. Mm-hmm. And so he said, you know what, you should just try eating more general total calories. I don't need to worry about my excess body fat. That's not a complaint. I just want more energy and peak performance and all that good stuff. My blood numbers were good. And so lately I've been doing this, to answer your question from 17 minutes ago, I've been making this super nutrient-dense green smoothie in the morning. And that's a change from fasting, which I had done for several months and enjoyed that too. So now I make a purposeful effort to get a lot of nutrition in there. It's not a high-carb smoothie like a lot of people are used to considering when you say the word smoothie. So I use a base of like unsweetened almond milk or coconut milk, and I'll put in maybe a handful of blueberries, maybe not, but I'll put in all kinds of green matter like celery, kale, chard, spinach, beets will go in there, and then assorted powders and supplements that I'm taking as part of this protocol, but also things like collagen, maybe some whey protein, and it turns out to be a pretty robust preparation where sometimes I have to consume it with a spoon because it's so thick. So that's my long answer is I've been having a green smoothie lately, but I also have no problem fasting and believe that it's a great lifestyle practice for anybody, especially trying to lose excess body fat or suffering from metabolic damage, trying to recover from things. You can play with that and see how it feels, but we're always trying to test and refine what works best for us. And I know the world of thyroid and adrenal dysfunction, some people are saying that that restricting those calories, fasting, might be an additional stress on the adrenals and the thyroid for certain people. And so, respecting those voices, it might be a good idea to try, something that has a high fat content, even if it's a beverage or an omelet or a smoothie that has a lot of good, dense nutritional value, and then see what works and measure things and carry on.
So we're like totally doing the interview now, Brad. So we're just going to carry on because that's what's happening right now. And it's really strange because I think you must be able to read my next question, which was, if you do have an adrenal issue or a thyroid issue, is fasting a problem, or is it something we should be really not concerned with until we've got things a bit more under control?
Well, as your listeners will soon grow to understand, I really like to do wise guy responses sometimes and not answer the question directly. And the first thing that I want to say on this matter is if you got those hormonal issues or fatigue or anything along those lines, I want to go to the sleep issue right away. And I think most people just don't sleep enough. Their evenings are filled with excess artificial light and digital stimulation after dark. So they're watching their Netflix queue or they're catching up on emails, and they're living this high-stress, hectic-paced life where they're constantly hyper-connected, even with the small device in their hand, and innocently fussing around in the hours before bed. And so if you can prioritize sleep at the very highest level of what your life is all about, and what you're committed to try to gain that health and regain that health and energy vitality, that's where I'd go first. And then everything else is sort of downstream from there, because what we see in a lot of occasions are people that are exquisitely precise with their diet and following the rules, and they never depart. They don't eat sugar. They don't eat any bad stuff. They don't have alcohol, extra caffeine, sugar, grains, but they're still in this kind of high-stress lifestyle pattern. So those great efforts that they're making toward diet are in some ways going to waste because they're not getting that basic covered, which is adequate, sufficient sleep. Then is fasting going to be a stress? And I don't know I don't want to offer like a definitive answer there, but I think, again, if we're looking at the big picture, you should be able to fast comfortably and be able to operate on internal energy stores for several hours upon waking up every morning. So you should be able to sustain an overnight fast and then get into your busy, hectic day without having energy level mood swings or hunger pains. And if you do, guess what? You should go eat something. So we don't want to ever get into radical. This mindset that the woulda, coulda, the woulda, coulda, shoulda mindset where you're doing something that maybe your coach recommended, and you feel like you'll let the person down if you don't fast until 12 noon because that's what's written on your chart or something. So I always want to honor the hunger and satiety signals from the body, and so anytime you're hungry, you go find some healthy, nutritious food. But I think the main thing, and the people in our world that we're familiar with, unless you're stumbling upon this podcast for the first time, is I want to get away from that carbohydrate dependency lifestyle where you wake up first thing in the morning and slam your system with a high dose of refined carbohydrates, and then perpetuate the cycle of being dependent on dietary carbohydrates for energy, because that absolutely will stress the adrenals, the thyroid, and it'll put you in constant fight or flight stimulation, because when you don't get access to your stored body fat and you're burning through the glucose that you consume quickly, your body will make a steady supply of glucose to fuel your energy needs because you're a glucose preferential burner, and you'll do that through activating the fight or flight response, getting those cortisol levels high, and just basically leading a high-stress life because of your food choices, as well as all the other stresses in your life.
Yeah, right. So back onto sleep, because, I absolutely agree, sleep is king. So what about if you're getting into bed, like 9:30, 10 o'clock, you might have been messing around on your phone, but you've got the blue blocker thing on there and it's all nice and amber glows, and you've got your rock salt lamps and your candles, but you've been on Facebook a little bit perhaps, or Instagram, till 9:30, you go to bed, you fall asleep, you feel like you've had perfect sleep, you wake up at 6:30 and you feel absolutely exhausted. What's going wrong there?
Well, you're probably paying the price for decades of abuse in some way, shape, or form. And I can certainly empathize with that because, I was competing as a professional triathlete for 9 years from ages 20 to 30. And I did a lot of damage to my body and my endocrine system and my fight or flight response during those years. And I feel like it's possibly, I'm possibly still paying the price in some ways because, if you live that rock star lifestyle, which I had nothing to do with that, but I might as well have been rock star lifestyle and not sleeping and partying all the time because I was pushing my body too hard and ignoring a lot of warning signals from my body. So I feel like if you can get that holistic alternative healthcare to make sure that you're covering all the bases and you're doing things right, the rest of it is you have to take what your body gives you each day and nothing more. And that's a tough lesson to learn for me as an athlete, because I wanted to be the best guy and train. I was willing to train as hard as I could to beat those bloody Australians who were dominating the sport for so many years.
Bloody
but if you're tired and it's not there and the energy's not there, you have to honor that, and you have to sit back and wait it out until you can generate energy naturally. Yes,
I love that. Take what your body gives you every day and no more, because you're right. Otherwise, you're just kind of depleting. And I guess, most of the listeners listening to this show, have lived with that 80s and 90s diet and fitness industry, flawed advice of eat less, move more, and we've literally starved ourselves for the last 20 years and exercised ourselves to ridiculousness, had stressful jobs. Obviously the female revolution, we can do everything, and I guess it's put a lot of stress on our system. And I guess that although you do get fantastic results when you do turn to Primal, it's going to take more than just 3 or 4 years to heal all of the damage that we've done, right?
I hope not, because 3 or 4 years is a bloody long time, and I'd want to be impatient with things like regaining my health. I don't think you should settle for, let's say, the traditional medical approach of saying, well, you're just going to have to not exercise until you feel better. And perhaps there's ways that you can, take some dietary supplements, things that you're falling deficient on, get out there and walk and get exposure to direct sunlight as soon as you awaken, because these will start to trigger hormones, and you do things to help along your than simply waiting around and laying until your energy comes back. So I want to clarify what I said before. You take what your body gives you each day, nothing more, but you work really hard to get the most out of your body and cover all the bases possible, and never give up or give up hope or resign yourself to saying that this is normal, because we're all on a quest for better health, and that's kind of my that's my hobby in life, is to see how I can promote longevity, how I can improve my peak performance. Even as I am an old guy, I still want to jump over the high jump bar and do better than I did last year, and all those things that give me that passion for life and competitive drive and intensity. But they have to be done properly. And one thing that you said, where you had that dream, the feminist liberation, thinking you can do it all. And the truth is that you can, but when you do it on fumes, when you do it on borrowed time, you will pay the price down the road. And I use this analogy when I'm talking to groups of athletes about their preparation and how many workouts do they need to do before they're really prepared for the Ironman. And I say, you know what, if I came over and put a gun to your head right now, this afternoon, you would be able to complete a marathon 26-mile run or a 140-mile Ironman. You'd be able to do it. You'd dig deep into your reserves. You might cross the finish line and they take you right into Queensland General Hospital or whatnot, but you can finish it because that adrenaline response, that fight or flight response, is so powerful in our body. And when we tap into that day after day after day and year after year to get through our overnight nursing shifts and also train for the endurance events or do CrossFit 5 times a week instead of 2.5, those are the things where intuitively you probably know deep down that you're burning the candle at both ends. You probably know that you're not honoring your health. And so, to make that recalibration to say, wow, I really got a lot going on right now. Some things are going to have to go. So I'm going to let my kids fend for themselves instead of look after them so I can train more. Whatever your decision is, you're going to have to tone things down and dial things back.
Yeah. Love it. Now, Brad, I've got you on the show today to talk about ketosis. And I guess the best place to start is with a reader's question. So I've got a question here from Chanel Bayliss, and she asks, what is the keto diet? What does it look like? And how do I do it safely? So that's you off to be able to talk for the next 3 hours, right?
Yeah, you're going to go to snack, get some porridge, and come back to the podcast. So the keto diet is kind of the highest expression of the primal paleo low carb dietary movement. And when you restrict carbs to a really diligent extent, you will start to manufacture an alternative energy source in your liver. And these are known as ketones. And the ketones are made under these unique and delicate circumstances where you're burning a lot of fat, whether it's body fat or ingested fat, you're burning primarily fat, and you have low levels of insulin, blood glucose, and also stored liver glycogen. So it's kind of a genetically programmed starvation mechanism where if we can't find sugar in our environment to consume, we make a sugar-like substance, a glucose-like substance that burns in the body just in the same manner that glucose does. But in fact, it burns more cleanly with less oxidative damage than does the what we call dirty burning glucose, which is the sugars in our diet and the conversion of other forms of carbohydrate into glucose to burn. So the body, the brain really loves to burn ketones. The heart really loves to burn ketones. The skeletal muscle will burn ketones just as efficiently or more efficiently than glucose. So it's kind of a pretty distinct and regimented eating pattern, because as soon as you consume a appreciable amount of carbohydrates, the liver shuts off ketone production in short order because the body senses that it does not need to produce ketones because it has plenty of glucose. So a single glass of orange juice or an innocent grab of some Halloween candies at the front desk at the office, you will shut off ketone production for a long period in some cases, but you have to work really hard to get into ketosis in the first place. So it requires a sustained period of dietary carbohydrate restriction, and the often touted level is to consume 50 grams per day of carbohydrates or below that to promote the state of ketosis or the burning of ketones.
Okay, so how would a typical day look for those of us who might not measure the grams of carbohydrates that we're eating? What would a typical day look like if you were trying to get into a state of ketosis, Brad?
Thanks. Good question. Team me up. Good. What we talk about in our new book, Mark Sisson and I, the Keto Reset Diet, is we talk about this measured and methodical approach to progress toward the potential to attempt nutritional ketosis. And I am saying it long-winded like that because this diet is so popular and it's a fad and there's a lot of information about it, people think, okay, I'll try it. I'll just stop eating carbs tomorrow and I'll get into ketosis and see what happens. And what happens is you're going to have bad breath, which is a telltale sign that you are excreting these ketone bodies because they're broken down into acetone, and that's the acetone breath that comes out of your mouth, and you also excrete them in the urine as well because you're not good at burning them. So the first thing you have to think about is that you have to get off that carbohydrate dependency eating pattern where you have regular meals with a significant amount of carbohydrates, and you've been doing so for years and decades because that's the standard Western diet, is a high carbohydrate diet, high insulin producing diet. You hardly ever produce ketones, and you're not good at making them or burning them. And so if you shut off the access to carbs that you've had for years and decades, you're not going to succeed with a keto approach. So the first step is to get rid of grains and sugars in the diet and start eating a more nutrient-dense, primal, paleo, ancestral-style diet where we choose from the familiar food groups of meat, fish, fowl, eggs, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds. So the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet that sustained human evolution, and those become the centerpiece of the diet. We've cut out the sugars and the grains, and we're transitioning gradually toward a future point where we're going to restrict carbohydrate intake further to get these special keto benefits. But first, you better be pretty devoted, primal, paleo, low-carb style eater to really consider something like keto. If you short-circuit that and say, I'm going to go into the 5-day keto blast because I saw a flashing ad on the internet, what you're going to do is instead of eating the sugar, your body will make the sugar from the aforementioned fight-or-flight response where you break down lean muscle tissue into glucose, and that fuels your brain's ravenous needs for glucose. So we want to do this the right way and be gradual and methodical if necessary. If you don't have a lot of experience eating primal paleo, or if you've been eating primal paleo for many years, you can try it tomorrow by just emphasizing the high-fat foods, getting yourself full satiety and satisfaction at each meal, and just dialing back even some of the nutritious carbs temporarily so that you can experiment with this ketosis. So Because vegetables, leafy green vegetables, high fiber vegetables, don't contribute a lot of net carbohydrate content, the keto diet can be highly abundant in these very nutritious foods that have a lot of benefits for gut health and fiber and antioxidant value. So you can eat a high vegetable intake diet, and really the carbs that you want to watch out for are those starchy tubers like sweet potatoes, squash, things like that are a little a higher carbohydrate content than, let's say, leafy green, things like that. You want to stay away from a large intake of fruit, because when you add up all the fruit you consume, especially if you're Weight Watchers and you get 0 points for fruit, you will tend to eat 4 or 5 apples and several slices of pineapple a day, and we know that that's converted into sugar in the body too. So the fruit intake has to be pretty minimal, and also kind of getting rid of all the other kind of trickly forms of carbohydrate that might roll into your diet, like a pinch of sugar here and there into your iced teas and wherever else. It's adding up, because that 50 grams comes up pretty quickly. So to give a picture of what it might look like, a lot of keto people are really enthusiastic about fasting because the appetite is so normalized, it's moderated when you get into this ketogenic state. You simply don't spike or have blood sugar drops that stimulate appetite because you're so good at burning fat, and you're burning fat at such a high rate. You can easily go through the day just getting your meals off of your storage areas in your body, or from the high fat meals that are the centerpiece of the keto eating style. So if you wanted to start your day in the morning with a delicious omelet with vegetables and avocado and salsa and cheese and bacon inside, and you have this wonderful meal that's got a lot of nutritional value and it's going to satisfy you for many hours afterward without spiking blood sugar. So you won't even feel hungry until hours in the afternoon. And then maybe if it's a snack time, rather than reaching for an energy bar or a sweetened beverage, you can go get a handful of macadamia nuts or some high cacao percentage dark chocolate, and again, get a high-fat, nutritious, deeply satisfying snack that will keep your energy going and keep you in that fat-burning state rather than defaulting back into the carbohydrate-burning state, which we know obviously happens when you reach for that energy bar and you didn't notice on the label that it had 32 grams of carbohydrates, or these massive doses that are so objectionable to our health that we consume in the course of a day without even thinking about it because they're so commonplace. The I don't know if you have Starbucks in Australia, but the
Sure
sweetened
do.
drinks that they peddle there, some of them have up to 100 grams of carbohydrates, which is something that, might have taken our ancestors 2 or 3 or 4 days to consume that many carbs. And we drink it starting from the drive-through back to our office. And it's just a huge affront to our genetic expectation for health, and also to our goals of reducing excess body fat or trying to curb hunger so that we can align with our goals of exercising and burning calories in a way that we're going to drop body fat.
Absolutely. And the coffee has come, when we're talking about Starbucks, let alone the carb content in one of those coffees that we would, as you say, Brad, mindlessly drink in the car while we're driving. We probably wouldn't even notice that we've consumed so much calories and carbohydrates in one hit. But the coffee has come so far away from the humble espresso to be, a triple shot latte with caramel and cream. But taking it back to just coffee in its purest form, Brad, what are your thoughts on coffee? Seems as though we've just hit a Starbucks tangent.
I never touch the stuff. You can see I'm a nervous guy already if you're watching on YouTube. I'm just full of energy. My toes are tapping. I'm wiggling around. But dating back to the time when I was a professional athlete, I wanted to notice and experience all the fatigue that I had, because that would allow me to make the proper training decision. So I did not want to wake up feeling dragging and groggy and then slam a hot beverage and get an artificial central nervous system stimulant to allow me to go out and perform. Because that is, like we talked about earlier in the show, that's an example of operating on borrowed time or burning the candle at both ends, whatever you want to say, where you're jacked up on a stimulant and that might affect, your best interests over a long period of time. So I like to manufacture my energy naturally from sun exposure and perhaps some deep breathing drills or some stretching drills first thing in the morning. I like to do my morning stretching, mobility, flexibility routine. And if you go on YouTube and you type in Brad Kearns morning routine, it's gone absolutely viral with over 70 views. but I show the little scissor kicks and the hamstring moves. That was a delayed laughter from across the ocean. Yeah, that is my goal in life, is to do like a viral YouTube video with millions and millions of views. So someday it'll happen. But right now I have my Brad Kearns morning routine, and it's the way that I get the energy going naturally, get the blood flowing. So I'm sort of against it for that reason. And there's all kinds of messaging out there that coffee drinkers live a little bit longer than non-coffee drinkers and all that nonsense. And I don't think it's going to be terrible for you if it's part of your life and you enjoy the ritual and the smell and all those things that I actually don't enjoy about coffee. But I do want to caution anyone to not use it as an energy crutch. So if you have the afternoon blues and you're falling asleep at your desk and you walk down to the break room to get some coffee, you have some issues in your life that might best be examined back at the source rather than just counting on the coffee machine to not be broken. So that's a big difference. So a morning wonderful coffee beverage with the smell and the aroma and doing the crossword puzzle, that's no objection. But 3 to 4 cups a day, 2 or 3 of them being to prop up sagging energy levels, that's something that's really troublesome, and I don't think there'd be too much dispute with that.
That sounds lovely. The crossword, the coffee, that sounds like a beautiful daily ritual. And it's such, harsh.
Yeah, that's Mark Sisson's. I borrowed that from him. That's what he does.
Oh, he's such a little old man, isn't he, doing his crosswords? Love Mark. I do love Mark so much. My dad does crosswords too, but he is a little bit older than Mark, and I hope that we all look as fantastic as Mark does when we reach our 60s. So go, Mark. So while we're just on, I know we've taken a ketosis diversion here, but I really love to find out what my guests think about coffee. So thanks for sharing your thoughts. So if it's a beautiful daily ritual, then tick. If it's an energy crutch, then cross. What are your thoughts on wine and chocolate while we're at it?
I'm not an alcohol drinker either.
Oh,
no, for no big reason. Party pooper, I know. And so I get to be the designated driver. That's my distinctive purpose with all my wine drinking associates. So, again, it's something that's very commonly abused in modern society, so you always have to put that out there. We also have to acknowledge that it really doesn't have any distinct nutritional value outside of the things like the grapes in wine that you can get from consuming grapes. So the alcohol is a toxin to the body, yes. And when you consume it, you put the burning of all other calorie sources on hold. So if you have fat reduction goals or goals to get into a good groove with keto, you have to recognize that the alcohol is basically putting everything on hold while you burn through the calories that you consumed in the alcohol. Not the biggest deal. If you have a glass of wine now and then, I don't think it's going to be a bigger deal breaker. I'd rather see you cut out the Jamba Juice in the morning than your glass of wine, because there are much more health objections to a high sugar Jamba Juice, despite what it says on the menu about all the health benefits. But that's my personal view on that. And then, of course, dark chocolate is one of the centerpieces of the treats and the recommended foods in primal paleo and keto as well, because you can get these wonderfully produced high quality dark chocolates that have a ton of health benefits, high antioxidant values, as high as any of the foods out there on the list, the polyphenols, the thing that give you cognitive benefits and a calming effect on your central nervous system, and all the nutritional benefits. So I'm a huge fan of dark chocolate, and I like to make a preparation called dark chocolate macadamia nut bark, where I melt half the chocolate and the other half's chunked in there. I spread blended macadamia nuts, and I put it in a casserole tray and freeze it in the freezer and cut it into delicious bark chunks. So I ate a ton of dark chocolate. And I just heard a great podcast from Nourish, Balance, Thrive, where they're talking about the difference in quality among even the seemingly fancy dark chocolates that have a high price point. But what you want to find on the lead ingredient is cacao beans, and that's very important to find dark chocolate made with the original beans as the lead ingredient, and stay away from ones that have a blend of cocoa mass, cocoa solids, chocolate liqueur, terms like that, indicating that there's been more processing done, which diminishes the antioxidant value. And guess what? You're going to pay a lot more money for these naturally produced bars. They usually have a fair trade stamp on it if you care about child slave labor in those chocolate-producing countries. So you want to be discriminate and pick the best chocolates that you can find on the market. And the highest cacao percentage dark chocolate, that's the more nutritional benefit, the more fat, the less sugar. And then you get down to milk chocolate, obviously that's just another sugar bomb to go with all the other things that we want to remove from the diet. So dark and naturally, sustainably produced is the message there.
Love it. And that's news to me about the cacao bean chocolates. I'm going to go and have a little Google search for some of that afterwards. And the 90% dark chocolate does take a while to get used to, doesn't it, when you're used to the milk chocolate? But after a while, I've just found if I do steal a little bit of somebody else's chocolate, it's like putting some kind of sugary wax into your mouth. It's revolting, isn't it, compared to the depth and just the depth and the taste and the quality of proper chocolate. Such a difference.
Oh my gosh, you're so right, Helen. I mean, I have to say that I've absolutely flip-flopped with my palate and my taste buds. So when I was first trying to get acquainted with dark chocolate, it was recommended. I'm trying to get rid of the sugar in my diet, and I'd taste the dark chocolate, and it was tough. Like you say, when you're hitting 80, 85%, 90, and you're just having a bite out of the blue, most children will spit it out, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was tough to get used to, but after a while, now if I go back and have a bite of milk chocolate, it's disgusting. It's way too sweet. Same with all the sweetened desserts that used to be a centerpiece in my life, like cheesecake. I'm a huge cheesecake fan. I love it. Oh my gosh. And now when I have a cheesecake, which I still do now and then when the mood strikes me, I can enjoy so much less volume and be totally satisfied. And a lot of them taste too sweet, and they just don't do it for me like they used to. So I feel like the cheesecake is like oozing its way out of my diet very slowly and gradually. And when I do enjoy some, it's like half of the amount that I used to without even thinking about it, just pounding that cheesecake and enjoying it in a different way, sort of a gluttony way, rather than now when we're getting to more attention to diet, the desire to remain in a keto state or something where you're making good decisions and you're enjoying the things that are allowed to the full extent, rather than just mindlessly shoving stuff down your mouth, like your example with the drinking the Starbucks while you're navigating traffic.
Yeah. And there's a big difference, isn't there, Brad, from, having that one piece of cheesecake for, on occasion and really enjoying it, taking time to experience the taste, the smell, all of it, and to have a smaller amount than you would just, as you said, glutton it in, to then say, oh, that's it. Oh, I've had something non-primal. I've fallen off the wagon. I'm a failure. I'm hopeless, and then go into that whole cycle of guilt and self-loathing. There's like a massive difference between the two, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I know this is a huge concern, especially in the female population, because we have so much flawed cultural programming around diet. But I feel like when you're talking about this primal paleo, low-carb keto movement, you're addressing one of the major causes of eating disorder and disordered eating, not to put labels on people, but I think we all suffer from some level of disordered eating somewhere along the spectrum. Some people are diagnosed and seeing a medical professional, and some people like me, when I was an athlete, I was compelled to overeat so I could recover faster and train again the next day. And then there are other times when if I gained some excess body fat, it was such an important big concern for me because I was a racer that I had to, think about food in a way that was unwhole and unnatural. I was introducing these outside variables rather than just eating to full satisfaction at each meal, enjoying the experience of preparing food and shopping for healthy foods and all that wonderful stuff we do. So if you can get down to basics where you're eating meals because you're pursuing the enjoyment of food, you know that you're not carbohydrate dependent anymore. So if you skip a meal, it's no big deal. It's not going to ruin your day. And therefore you break that unhealthy connection with food as fuel for your gas tank. And it's sort of like when we drive our cars, I'd say we're addicted to gasoline because we really don't want to run out of gas, and we know what a bummer it is to walk the last 7 kilometers back to our house. So we're obsessed with keeping the needle correct on the gas tank. And the same thing comes with our bodies when we're carbohydrate dependent. So we're thinking about our next meal. As soon as we finish lunch, we wonder what's for dinner because we know we're going to get that energy dip. We're going to be looking for snacks. We're going to making sure that we're packing the proper snacks in our travel gear, lest we go 2 hours without food. And it's a troublesome way to go through life and then try to tell people, hey, have a healthy attitude about food when you're addicted to that sugar energy. So I want to rewind it to that point where when you could become fat adapted, some people report it's the greatest awakening they've ever had in their life, and they finally feel healthy and not obsessed about food anymore.
So we've been doing Primal for a couple of years. We are deciding to try to get into ketosis. How do we know when we're there?
Oh boy, good question. And again, deserving of a wise guy roundabout answer. Because when you say that term ketosis, the literal definition of ketosis is that you're accumulating ketone bodies in the bloodstream faster than you're burning them. And that is not necessarily indicative of being metabolically fit or being fat adapted. So in other words, the example of, extreme carbohydrate restriction out of the gate to someone who's carbohydrate dependent, you're going to get into ketosis really quickly, but it means it has no beneficial meaning necessarily. You might just be excreting them. So that's the important thing to understand about using that term, where we want to get into ketosis the right way and have it be health promoting and be hand in hand with being fat adapted and burning primarily fat rather than being dependent on carbohydrates. So how will you know you're there? We talk about this in the book a lot too. Here's another YouTube plug for the book. Boy, am I good at that. Back and forth, getting you dizzy. How do you know you're there is that you can wake up in the morning and comfortably not consume any calories until 12 noon, let's say, as a benchmark, and feel fine and feel great and not have a crash and burn episode later that night to blame for your extended fast because you really weren't capable of doing it, but you forced yourself to do it. And so being able to access and burn stored sources of energy is your best sign that you're fat and keto adapted. Remember that the brain can burn only glucose. It can't burn fat in your brain. So your brain is entirely dependent on glucose. It requires 20 to 25% of your total daily caloric expenditure. So it's a huge energy demand organ. So it's this ravenous sugar burning machine that you need to fuel all the time. Or, as we're all familiar with, you get the afternoon blues and you start feeling saggy and draggy and you can't formulate sentences properly because you're having a sugar crash. So if you have that good cognitive stable function and good general stable energy levels, that's a sign that you're making the fat and ketones you need internally and that you've done the hard work necessary with dietary carbohydrate restriction. Of course, exercise is a catalyst to help you become more fat adapted if you exercise in the proper manner, not over-exercise. And so all these subjective signs, we're really strong on emphasizing those rather than pricking your finger 10 times a day and looking at your blood numbers and searching on the internet whether 0.3 is good enough or 0.7 is the cutoff and all those kind of things, which I think down the line we can talk about those in a level 2 podcast where we're talking about a higher level of sophistication for all this stuff now that we're deep into it. But for the average listener who just wants to, try this ketosis thing and do it the right way, it's all about fine-tuning, getting that metabolic fitness going where you can freely and comfortably skip meals and burn stored energy.
Yes, and that's the thing that I love the most about the Primal Blueprint, Brad, is that it's all about how you feel and tuning back in to becoming an intuitive eater. Because I know that when I first started out Primal, I didn't really know when I was hungry. It was just, I based my hunger on meal times and clock time. And I know that a lot of the women that I coach now, we don't know when we're hungry because, for various reasons, as well as being a sugar burner, but also we've been socialized into clearing our plate, socialized into overeating. Otherwise, we don't get the dessert. So there's a whole lot of things. There's a whole lot of things going on there. But I don't want to go off at a tangent too much. But that's the thing I love the most about the Primal Blueprint is it's all about becoming an expert in you and really developing that self-awareness. And even though we've got all of this technology where we can measure every single step that we've done and how many times we turned over in our sleep and how much we weigh and how much ketones are in our blood or our urine, it doesn't matter, right? It just depends on how you feel. Have you got the energy? Are you feeling hungry? So those are really the signs to look for, right?
Oh, love it. Very well said. Absolutely right. And of course, you got to enjoy yourself along the way. So when you hear people talk in terms of saying terms like cheat days with their diet, I get absolutely revolted and disappointed in that mentality, and that mentality being bantered around as something that's worthwhile. Because if you require a cheat day in your diet, then there's something wrong with your diet. It gives the connotation that you're suffering through some diet that's not contributing to the enjoyment of your life. So the cheat day is something to reframe and recalibrate to saying, I guess every day is an indulgent day is a better way to say it. And there's so many ways that you can live this lifestyle and get deep into the gourmet aspects and all these great cookbooks. And we have 100 recipes in the Keto Reset diet. Dr. Lindsay Taylor, my sidekick over at Primal Blueprint, we just did some filming in her kitchen today where she showed all these wonderful, delicious preparations that are so easy to make and so delicious and just, so much more delicious and satisfying than the quick food that we get when we're locked into carbohydrate dependency, when we're out on the street and getting that sugary Jamba Juice or the Starbucks. I'm sorry, those people are not going to sponsor your podcast probably after listening to me. But, it's a big difference to get into this movement and prioritize food to the extent that you're a true gourmet at all times, and you can pick and choose the meals based on pleasure rather than regimentation or following some predetermined arbitrary information that they're telling you, whether it's a coach or a magazine or a book.
Yeah, I love it. So ketosis, is it something that we want to be aiming for all the time, or is it, like the book says, more of a reset?
Good question. I think we're very happy, Mark and I, having sorted through all the controversy and the naysayers and the critique. We're very happy the way this message came out. And I think it's really something that is a bucket list item for everyone. No matter who you are, you should at least go through the process of ditching the unhealthy refined carbohydrates permanently from your diet, as well as the refined vegetable oils that are so toxic and destructive to health at the DNA cellular level immediately upon ingestion. Absolutely awful that they're still available for consumption on the planet. So if you can ditch the grains, sugars, and refined vegetable oils and trend in the direction of metabolic flexibility, the ability to burn a variety of fuel sources, this is all extremely health promoting, extremely beneficial, zero downside to building your metabolic flexibility through things like fasting or carbohydrate restriction. And then finally, that ultimate step of getting into ketosis and trying to sustain nutritional ketosis for a minimum of 6 weeks, because that's when you really get the full benefits kicking in. From week 0 to 3, it might be a little bit of a struggle. It's less carbs than you're used to. You might have some energy dips as you're revving up those fat-burning genes, but they're not quite at full strength. But then as you get into week 3, 4, 5, and 6, you start to feel fantastic. You're dropping excess body fat as easy as you ever had, and you're keeping it off, and there's no hunger pains, and there's no struggling and suffering. So everyone deserves to complete that Keto Reset complete program at least once in their lives, and it's probably a very, very good idea in the winter months when the days are colder and shorter and darker, when we're designed to sleep more, exercise less, and consume less carbohydrates. That's another good time to say that you would do an annual keto reset where you dip into the strict nutritional ketosis for 6 weeks and maybe do that once a year. So I would recommend that for almost everybody. It can't hurt. It's not going to even disturb an extreme high competitive athlete because we're talking about doing it in the winter for 6 weeks. And so from there, then you have an assortment of options and preferences and, personal experimentation to see what works best for you. And this is a topic, now I'm getting off on a tangent, but I think it's an important one that we've been talking about off camera and offline amongst our team in great detail because we want to have a strong message to come out with. But one thing that's been really on my mind lately is that if you're in a certain category, like you're a person who is comfortable or claiming that they have ideal body composition, they don't need to lose excess body fat, their blood markers look good, so their triglycerides are low, their HDL is high, the inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein are low, the HbA1c, the long-term glucose, and the insulin levels are low. You have good blood, you have good body fat, and you have athletic or competitive goals and fitness goals, and you want to get the most out of your body and recover quickly, you might be following a little different decision-making process than someone who's trying to recover from metabolic damage, adrenal dysfunction, thyroid dysfunction, or has excess body fat that they're having a very difficult time removing it. And so right now, we've been of the thinking to date that dialing back your carbohydrates is the simplest and most direct route to dropping excess body fat. There might be some nuances of that to consider where you want to kind of cycle in and out and go back up with your caloric intake so that you don't slow down your metabolic function in response to cutting your calories trying to lose weight. So maybe the best way to lose excess body fat is to spend a lot of time in keto, and then other times where you relaxed your standards, you're allowing back in some sweet potatoes, some fruit, whatever you enjoy, especially if you're athletic. But, taking a thoughtful approach to see what works and what doesn't. And there's some great spokespeople out there that are pounding the drum. I got to meet Leanne Vogel, who's a popular keto author at a recent conference at KetoCon in Austin, Texas. And people are spreading a really good message. It's really reasonable. There's not a lot of wackos out there that are getting this crazy and misinterpreting. So I think like common sense is prevailing. But when it's not, when you get a soundbite from someone or a casual comment from someone, make sure you keep things in the proper perspective and that you look to your own personal goals and needs more so than just blindly following what someone else says. Excellent
advice. I love it. I love it. Now, we're just going to round off with a couple of final questions, Brad. One is a reader's question, which is, can we eat too much fat?
Good question. Wow. If Dr. Lindsay heard that one on the Keto Reset Facebook group, she would go to town and probably already has with some extensive comments because this is a big topic of discussion and controversy in the keto game right now. And I would say, just to give a quick answer, since I've given so many wise guy answers, yeah, you can. And the main idea of ketone production and ketone burning is this genetic survival instinct to kick in when you don't have sufficient dietary carbohydrate calories. And so when you're in that starvation-like state is when your body works really well. In a fasting or starvation state is when you have the enhanced cell repair, the autophagy, the cleaning out of damaged cellular material, natural cellular detoxification processes all upregulate when you're fasted or when you're starving or when you're in this keto-style eating pattern where you're burning a lot of stored body fat rather than stuffing your face with fat every single day in the name of being in this keto diet thing. So it's not necessarily about stuffing your face with fat and making a concerted effort to go find more and more sources of fat to consume because you're so good at burning stored body fat that you can easily tap into your body fat storage and get even further benefits from the keto lifestyle.
Right, so it's really about becoming an expert in you. I think, sorry, Brad. I think we just got a little bit broken up there. Carry on.
Yeah, sorry. Because it seems like one of the huge and most overpowering goals in this whole scene is to get rid of that excess body fat once and for all. So if you're stuffing your face with high fat beverages that give you 400 or 500 calories with not a lot of nutrition, by the way, you're kind of defeating the purpose of getting good at burning your own stored body fat. Now, going back several minutes in the show, if you're concerned about the stress of fasting and you have a healthcare practitioner that's saying, be careful with your adrenals, we don't want to fast for extended periods, and you have some small high-fat meals or high-fat snacks to sustain you throughout the day, that might be a good protocol for you. But the idea of going out there and stuffing your face and forcing yourself to consume extra fat in the name of keto is not warranted.
That's a great explanation, because I think there's a lot of stuff floating around on the internet now, with fat bombs and bulletproof coffees alongside your bacon and eggs and avocado. And it's probably a little bit excessive to, I guess you can consume enough of the fat that you require from choosing high fat foods like eggs, avocados, your macadamia nuts. You need to move to Australia so you can get such good quality macadamia nuts. I should send you some, bread.
That's right.
They're so in abundance.
Oh my gosh.
Fantastic. They're fantastic.
I'll trade you for some Primal Mayo if you want.
Oh, that sounds like a great deal. So tell me about the book, because I can't wait. Mine is ordered. It's on its way. What's in the book? So I've got, you've mentioned there's a six week protocol to follow. Is that right?
Well, the stages are, first you do this 21-day reset, which is referenced on the title as kind of the hook, because that's how you sell books about diet, is you have those numbers on there and something that the reader can grab onto and jump into. And it's really nice because this 21-day metabolism reset is all about the act of ditching grains, sugars, and refined vegetable oils as the first and foremost goal before we talk about anything related to keto or macronutrient composition and percentages. So first we got to get the junk out of our diet. And at the same time, during that first 21 days, we're going to focus on our exercise, sleep, and stress management patterns, because these go hand in hand with dietary transformation. So if you just cut the sugar out of your diet, but you're not sleeping enough and you're over-exercising and you're constantly stressed and wired on adrenaline, these are behaviors that promote sugar burning and promote carbohydrate dependency. Even though your actual sleep has nothing to do with the foods you chose that day, when you wake up the next day being deficient on sleep, you're going to be profoundly insulin resistant, even missing a single night of sleep or a single night of compromised sleep. Or I think there was one study from University of Chicago, 2 weeks of compromised sleep increased insulin resistance by double. In other words, the inability to use insulin successfully and be more dependent and more craving of sugar in the diet. So you got to get the sleep, exercise, and stress management matters handled during this 21-day reset. So it really is an all-in, jump-in practice to get your all four aspects cleaned up: the diet, the exercise, the sleep, and the stress management. Now, when you graduate from that 21-day reset, you actually take a Keto Reset diet midterm exam in the middle of the book, and these are checkpoints to see how well you are doing with your metabolic flexibility, your fat adaptation. So it's a series of subjective questions like, how long can you last in the morning before you need to eat? And if you can last till 8 a.m., that's not a high score because that's right when you wake up, or 1 hour after you wake up. But if you can get till noon, you're getting high scores in these metabolic flexibility areas, and those indicate that you will be ready for the final stage of the process, which is entering nutritional ketosis for 6 weeks. And that it requires dialing in your protein intake so it's not excessive, and regulating your carb intake to 50 grams per day or below if you're active, and only 20 grams per day if you're inactive. So you want to be active, of course, and it really greatly contributes to your progress.
That's fantastic. And that's, it really is the key, isn't it? A lot, I think, and this is really also a hangover from what we talked about before, Brad, with regards to the flawed conventional wisdom that we've been receiving around diet, is that we just need to focus on food. And whereas it starts with food, and food's like, I feel the biggest biohack you can do. It really does. You need to have those other components, like you say, the four areas. I call them the 4 pillars in my coaching, because you do need to have all of those aspects. So now my closing question is a bit of a political one. I've been a bit umming and erring whether I'm going to ask it, but
what do I think of President Trump?
No,
I'm absolutely shocked at how stupid our country is to elect him. Oh, sorry, it's not a political show.
Vicky Freeborough has asked, she's been following a low-carb, high-fat keto kind of diet for a while, and she's seen a lot of improvements in herself and also in the keto communities. And her question you ready for this one, Brad, is why aren't government bodies doing more research into the outcomes of following keto? And why do we still get prescribed the food pyramid that is clearly causing harm?
Woo! Political question for sure. I recall a great quote from Dr. Doug McGuff, who's one of our authors. He wrote The Primal Prescription, and he wrote Body by Science, a very popular strength training book. And he's an emergency room physician from South Carolina. And he made the comment that, look, science, government, and all these large bodies will come around. They'll see the light, to the ancestral way, the thing that we're on the cutting edge of and getting more and more support, but it's still a very small percentage of society that agrees that these are the foundational principles of healthy eating. He says everything will come around, but it's going to take 20 years because that's how slowly science moves. And that's how slowly the massive government agencies and the behemoth organizations move. And he said, personally, I don't want to wait that long, so I'm going to take matters into my own hands right now and study up myself, do the research, vet the research myself, make informed decisions, test something out for 21 days. If you're a naysayer and a skeptic, give yourself 21 days and see if things don't feel better for you. And that's a great way to characterize and kind of help with the frustration of why the government is still spouting this nonsense. I think there's marketing forces, too, that are in there that are so powerful and have so much lobby and influence on government policy. And we know now that this is the state of being in modern society. But the great thing about, living in the free world is that we still have that freedom of choice where we can decide to go down to the market and purchase what we want and not purchase the things that we don't want, that we don't believe in. And we can make that statement with our wallet and we can shape culture accordingly. That's why, organic has become so popular in the last 15 years is because consumers said, oh, this is healthier. Okay, I guess I should buy it and not buy this other stuff. And therefore, the prices become more affordable as more demand comes, and it's wonderful to see change take place among forward-thinking people. And who wants to be backward-thinking? I'd rather be forward-thinking at the front of the pack,
Absolutely. And who's got 20 years to hang around and wait to see if the politicians agree with us or not? And I really, really like that answer, Brad, because it's really about, becoming an expert in yourself, being the change you want to see. And, we often feel frustrated with our politicians, but we do have so much power in the fact that we can vote with our dollar. And we can, in Australia here, we're seeing grass-fed meat coming into the mainstream supermarkets, which is fantastic because it was so hard to source before. So it's power to the people. Vote with your dollar, hey?
Also, it's important to realize some of our notions, our flawed notions, such as the fact that a medical doctor, a physician, is necessarily knowledgeable about nutrition because they haven't been trained in nutrition. They may have a personal interest in nutrition, and some of them are prominent authors in our field, and wonderful for them. Dr. Kate Shanahan, one of my favorite people, she's a frontline person that has patients every day in a family practice medical clinic, but she's also deep into the research and one of the leading proponents of ditching oils out of the diet and all those great things. But that's just because she's a unique individual that has done that studying on her own. But when you have traditional medical training, they might not know anything about diet, but they still might be of that mindset or that type of personality where they're going to dispense dietary advice to their patients just because they're in this position of power and authority, and the patients are going to be listening and receptive rather than skeptical. So I want to, when I was an athlete, this goes back to my days, trying to make the right decisions in training. And I took feedback and guidance from people that had been there and achieved great things as athletes. I believe they had tremendous credibility right on the surface because they had already run a 13 flat 5,000 meters or whatever it was. And so that had a lot of value to me that they were walking their talk and living that life. And then they could dispense information as an authority. So if you go to your physician and they're giving you some dietary advice, but they're not a picture of health themselves, I would second guess that stuff. And as far as a politician, they have, no expertise in nutrition necessarily, and they might have untoward influences on what they say because they're politicians. competition. So, we got to go to good sources of people that put out good information and then try it and vet it out ourselves so we can trust something that really works for us.
Awesome. Love it. Now, we can find you at bradkearns.com. Where can we find the book?
Oh, go check out ketoreset.com. And it has all kinds of fun information on there, including what we called a pre-order bonus offer. So I'm going to extend that to all your listeners and keep it going, even though the official release date, October 3rd, has already passed. So whenever this podcast airs, if you purchase your book wherever you like, in your online or at a bookstore, and you go to ketoreset.com, you can enter in a receipt number, something that proved you purchased it, and we'll send you 4 free digital bonus items. So there's some recipes that come in a PDF form. There's a hour-long discussion with Mark and I, the authors of the book, where we get deep into the topics and sort of unplugged and some interesting new information, and a couple other great bonus items that you'll love. A whole cookbook, the sauces, dressings, and toppings Primal Blueprint cookbook is one of the bonus items. So take advantage of that offer, and we'll have more content coming up. But also go to Facebook and join the Keto Reset Facebook group, moderated by Dr. Lindsay Taylor. And these guys are going crazy. We only formed the group on September 14th. So less than a month later, we have like 11,000 members. It's gone absolutely crazy. There's a lot of engagement, and it's real people. So I definitely want you to head over to the Facebook group and the website, and we'll go from there.
It's a seriously awesome Facebook group. I joined that just the other day, and it was at 8,000, and it's already jumped to 11. That's absolutely phenomenal. Well done. That's really cool. Hey, Brad, before you go, did you narrate the Primal Blueprint certification course? The actual
yeah, that was me.
I listened to all of those.
13 hours of my voice.
I loved
thanks
it.
for listening.
That was.
Yeah, I figured some people, they might want to read as much as they have time to listen. So I said, I'm just going to talk it up, man. I'm
so grateful you did that, because sitting down and reading it was too overwhelming. But I could put you on whilst I was baking or cleaning or pottering, and then I could just sit down and do the test. And I flew through the course. It was awesome, and it's so much easier to absorb when it's being spoken to. And you were funny, like you'd say, "Oh, blah blah blah," and you kept doing these little like at the end at the end of each of that. I loved it. So thank you.
If you're gonna make that commitment to listen to me for 13 hours, we're gonna have some fun. And by the way, I also narrated the Keto Reset diet book, and so this was. From a major publisher, Harmony Books. I went to their fancy Penguin Random House recording studios, and I had an engineer and a director doing everything the fancy way, unlike the health coach that you heard. But I ad-libbed so much off the script of the book that this guy was shaking his head like he could not believe I was just spewing this stuff out of my mouth that came out of nowhere. But I thought it added some value to the book, so I'd just start talking as an aside, and then I'd say, okay, let's get back to the book now. And if I can make myself laugh, that's important while I'm reading for 8 hours as well. So go ahead and enjoy the audio version of the Keto Reset diet too.
Even better. Love it. Brad, thank you so much for all of your time today. It has been an absolute honor and a thrill and a career high to have a chat with you. So grateful.
Oh, remember the Primal Alternative. Thank you for listening. What a great show, Helen. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Brad.
Dum-da-dum. Okay.
It's a wrap. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you. That was great. Great show.